the seminar and book launch for Thailand Contestation, Polarization and Democratic Regression. This is the latest book published about Thai politics by Dr. Prachak Kongkirati. And today it is a special occasion to have the book launch here with the distinguished speakers. First one I really want to introduce. He has written the extensive works on Thailand. I think the student of Thai politics here familiar with his name. Professor Duncan McCargo. He's the President's Chair in Global Affairs at the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. And the second speaker, I think this is a must. He wrote a book that a must read for Thai students, especially on the Thai history. And we are very pleased to have him here. Please welcome Dr. Chris Baker. And the third speaker, the author of this book, and he has written many works on Thai politics, democratization, social movements, and he will answer any question if you have regarding this book. Please welcome Dr. Prachak Kongkirati. Dr. Prachak Kongkirati is the Associate Professor here at the Faculty of Political Science, Thammasat University. So the first round, I would like to invite our two speakers to have a comment why this book is a must-read for the student of Thai politics. I would like to start from Professor McCargo, around 20 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that. So, is this on? You hear me all right? Okay, all right, there we go. Okay, so wonderful to be here and to have a chance to take part in this event. It's fantastic that Ajahn Prajak's book is out for quite a variety of reasons, not least I've already assigned the book to my Station Politics and Thai Politics the moment I got access to it, and NTU Library immediately subscribed to it, because my students are always asking me, can you give us some basic introduction? Your lectures are too complicated. We don't know what you're on. What is this happening in? What's happening in Thailand? How come the Prime Minister changed again? All this kind of stuff. Okay, so now we have a really simple answer to all of these questions. Read Ajahn Prajak's book. So there has been seriously a gap for a book exactly like this, an introductory book, and many of us have wanted to see that book, and many of us have not. I don't know about Chris, but we haven't quite really wanted to write that book because it's a very difficult thing to do. To sit down and write something about your research is challenging enough, but to pull together all these big themes and arguments and ideas in such a way that somebody who doesn't know very much about the topic can very quickly assimilate a lot of information, presented in an analytical way, that's awfully hard, right? So it's great that Prajak's done this, not least because we don't have to do it now, but really because it's a very valuable and important book in its own right. So I'm delighted to have the book out. A book launch should be a joyous moment. I don't see any physical books for us to, otherwise you should be queuing up to sign your books outside, Ajahn, but it is a great moment to have this book out, and of course for most people these books, especially these Cambridge Elements books, are essentially digital, but yes, a physical book does exist, okay? It's not just an AI generated book, but the book really exists, and there is one. So the book is out there, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it. The book covers a period of Thai political history from the late 50s until now. So just under 70 years. And conveniently, the just under 70 years are discussed, and all the analytical frameworks and things relating to them are discussed in just under 70 pages. So an incredible amount of stuff has to be condensed into an extremely short space. And that is the task that people like me have been avoiding for years, because it's really, really hard to do. Some of you might know, in another life, I have done a textbook about written 3 editions of. It's relatively straightforward to write a textbook about something you don't know anything about, because it's easier to be closer to where the students are in terms of thinking how to frame the material. But the deeper you go into a topic, Jampa Jack has gone very, very deeply into Thai politics, the harder it is to step back from all the details of that topic and actually do this kind of thing, which is this condensed overview that really pulls together what matters out of all the material. So I know it's a daunting task, and it's really great that this book is out there. Speaking first, I'd probably better tell you what's in the book in case you haven't yet been able to sign up and download it. It's a book that focuses on a number of themes, and the themes are primarily chronic instability and ever-changing. And of course, just this past couple of weeks, we've had more evidence of the ever-changing regimes. We thought we had a stable prime ministerial situation, and lo and behold, it all changes again. The nexus of business and politics sustains a patrimonial structure featuring patronage and corruption. And then, I guess the one that certainly my students in Singapore at the moment are most excited about, contestation of identity, mass mobilization, of which we've seen quite a bit in the past few years, not least in the 2021 period that was so pivotal in Thailand's recent politics. So how do you go about talking about those themes? And this is where there's the fork in the road problem, okay? Some of us might have been tempted to organize the book around the themes, and the other choice, Ajahn Prajak's choice, is to tell a story, a historically informed narrative going period by period. So that's what he's done. It's probably clearer and easier for students, but this is the dilemma that if you're going to write a textbook about something, this is the dilemma you face. Are you going to write about a set of themes, or are you going to tell a story? Because if you tell a story, the danger is you might get lost in some of the details, which is quite easy to do, given the number of details that we've got here. So what Ajahn Prajak has done is carefully steer away from giving us laundry lists of prime ministers, coups, street protests, and so forth, and tried very hard to keep with the big picture. So there's a short introduction, a short conclusion, and then 4 core chapters. One is on consolidation, contestation, and co-optation, the Royal Military Alliance and its opposition. Then economic crisis, national political restructuring, and local power reordering. Wow, that's a lot. That's 97 to 2006. Then we have political crisis, polarization, inequality, and violence. And then the last substantive chapter is the struggle for new political order since 2014. So that's what's going on in the book. And as you can, just hearing those headings, you're already getting the idea that there's an awful lot of material to be dealt with here. Now, what everybody needs at their book launch is a quotable quote. And Chris is last time we did the Future Forward book, Chris gave us these fantastic quotable quotes that we then posted all over the NEAS website. So what you need is a quotable quote from this event. So here goes. A masterful overview of Thailand's politics during the past 70 years. A must-read book for everyone who wants to understand Thailand today. Okay. And a book that I can literally say I've already assigned to all of my students, and they're reading it as we speak for tomorrow's Thai politics class. So when I say this, I'm not just making it up because Prajak's an old friend of mine and because I want to be invited back to Thammasat. It's actually true in this case. And I've already talked about how difficult that exercise is. Okay, so those are the things that really matter about the book. The phrase deep state doesn't appear in the book, which is great. It really is a book that talks about power networks. Some of you know that I wrote this notorious article a few years ago. So Ajahn Prajak's perspective is very much talking about competing networks of power. He's not a subscriber to conspiracy theories. He's not convinced that there's someone masterminding everything that happens in Thailand every 5 minutes. And in that sense, he and I are very much on the same page. How has he been able to write this book? Well, of course, I think most people in this room are academics or have flirted with academia, so you know that actually, even before we read the book, what do? We go to the bibliography, first of all, to see if we're in it, and then also to see who else is in it and how the argument of the book has been built up. And what you see from the bibliography of the book is all of the articles and chapters and things that Prajak himself has written, and how actually this book here summarizes, synthesizes arguments that he's made elsewhere. So often you're thinking we need a bit more of that, but the answer is there is more of that, it's just in another source that can't be squeezed into this book. So what that's a testament to is the importance really of working on a range of different topics and being able to bring that sort of experience together for purposes of teaching, for purposes of research, and to write a book of this kind. In order to get an overview, we need to have gone deeply into a number of things. And here I'm going to say a couple of points that don't directly relate to Prajak and his book, just since I believe one or two people might be listening and maybe someone will take notice of this stuff. One of the great things is that Prajak was able to come back from doing his PhD and press on with his research, partly because he's very good at organizing his time and multitasking and all this kind of stuff. But what I see all too often, not just in Thailand, we see it in many other places, but we see it very acutely in Thailand, is people come back fresh from their PhDs, sometimes abroad, sometimes doing the PhDs here in Thailand now more and more, start teaching in a place like Thammasat or some other university, and lo and behold, they're told two things. First, everything you wrote in your PhD thesis can't be published because that doesn't count for your promotion. Right, okay, please, if anyone's listening, this is the most idiotic idea which bears no relationship to how academia is done in Denmark, the United States, Singapore, or the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, all 4 countries which I have taught in. Okay, this is not how it should work. Please get rid of this rule, because what we need people to do when they come back is to take stuff from their PhD, and that will be the starting point for them to get stuff published and get socialized into a research-oriented academic career. Because otherwise what happens is, teaching quality assessment. The new Ajahn just arrived. Please take care of all this bureaucratic nonsense, okay? Piles and piles of paperwork relating to stuff like this. And we see this over and over again. People's academic spirit is being crushed and killed under a weight of paperwork. What happened in the UK is they brought this nonsense in. We said, we're not having any of it, and we got rid of it, basically. Teaching quality assessment still exists. It floats up in the air at the university level. We're not assessing individual courses. Individual lecturers are not sitting filling in forms until midnight. This stuff is also killing academia. So in order for people like Prajak and those coming up in universities all over the place, but especially right here, it would be great if, Thailand's great at importing ideas from elsewhere. This particular idea shouldn't have been imported, and now it would be great if people imported what we did in the UK, which is basically to get rid of it, or to turn it into something that's light touch and much less time consuming. Because then we would have more people who are in a position to write the articles that would help to inform a book like this, because we need more articles and books and research. And more people are doing this research, which is great. When I started studying Thai politics, there were only a handful of people working on it. The expansion of the field and the rise of new kinds of people making academic careers, especially here in Thailand, is absolutely fantastic. But it would be great if we could turn the tide back on a couple of those points. Okay, so this is the point where I have to mention one or two things that if I had written the book myself, I might have done it slightly differently. Or, one thing about this kind of book, it ends with the sentence, Thai politics is never static, and evokes both despair and hope, right? Since the book's not really describing a static situation, I think we can assume that Prajak's going to be in demand to write more editions of this book in the future. So these are things that one might think about. A couple of things where, a different emphasis could be placed. There's quite a bit of reference to urban-rural, and I'm very attached to the idea that the distinction between urban and rural has become blurred in what I call urbanized villages, and other people have used different phrases and different conceptions. So is there a value in thinking about that? My favorite facetious sentence on this is like the bedrock of red shirt support or Puratai support in the past was poor farmers who were not poor and are not farmers, because many of them in Bangkok or in the 5 surrounding provinces. So there's a massive discrepancy between where people are registered to vote and where they actually live. And I think that complicates the urban-rural thing, which I know that you're very well aware of this, but it's the kind of thing that it would be helpful just to signal a little bit of that. Okay, I flew in from Patani last night, so I was looking for references to the south, and there's not very much about that. For me, what happened in the south exactly 20 years ago this year with the re-emergence, it never went away, but the re-emergence of that conflict was very much a turning point in terms of these different power networks coming out to clash. It seems to me that the original clash between what I call network monarchy and the Thaksin network emerges as a result of differences about how to handle the South, and then rolls on from there. So I'd love to have heard a little bit about that. And there wasn't that much. Yeah, you've only got 70 pages, and I understand this, and I know that in other work you've covered some of this stuff, but there wasn't very much about beyond Bangkok, about all the stuff going on in Isan in the 90s, about Bak Moon, about the Assembly of the Poor, and some of that stuff too. So those are other things that might be mentioned if they would give you like 2 more pages to expand in a future edition. I love the fact that seems like you have the same favorite article as me and all my students, and that's Nancy Bermio's article on democratic backsliding, which for anybody who's talking about democratic regression, there's this fantastic article by Nancy Bermio. And it's great because it all boils down to 3 things. It's a 2016 article from the Journal of Democracy. So she says, what's democratic backsliding? Well, typically it's manifested in 3 things. And you've heard about these 3 things, whether or not you know the article. One is promissory coups where people seize power saying, we're seizing power not because we want to seize it, but because we want to restore democracy and put everything back. Sound familiar? Yeah. And then executive aggrandizement, and the other one is electoral manipulation. And you say that the coups are the really important point, and the executive aggrandizement is less, and you do also say, okay, during the Thaksin period there was executive aggrandizement. For me, that's true. I'm not really disagreeing with you, but since I have to come up with something to say, you could argue that it was the executive aggrandizement after the 2014 coup that made as much difference as the coup itself, because you can have a coup like the one in 2006, which is much less aggrandizing, much less effective, and doesn't really change the game in the same way that the 2014 one did. But also the electoral manipulation, which you then mention, is of these 3 things that looms the largest. So you could argue that the coups are, although the coups are the drama and the excitement, the coups are in the long term less important than, say, the electoral manipulation, and that the executive aggrandizement might be given a bit more emphasis than you do. So those are my main thoughts. I'm looking forward to using this book. I'm looking forward to see how the students are going to react to the book. It's going to be indispensable for all of us, and it's fantastic that we have this book. We hope that Thai politics is going to evoke more hope than despair. And you could have written the sentence the other way around. It evokes both hope and despair, which might have read a bit more smoothly, but would have left us with the word despair instead of with the word hope. And I think you very carefully made sure that hope was the last word in the book. So hope, you have the last word, which is that there is hope, and let's hope that there is hope. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor McCargo, for your insightful discussion. I think it makes especially our students to want to read this Ajahn Prajak's book for sure. And now we turn to Dr. Baker. Same question. Why is this book a must-read for the student of Thai politics? Please.
Thank you very much. I must thank Ratazat very much for this invitation and an opportunity to come and say something nice about Prajak's book. As you've just heard, we've been told we have to say something nice about it, but we're not allowed really to say anything else. I also have to say that I knew Duncan would take this away, but the best line in the book is the last line. Right. Whichever way you put it round, I mean, the conclusion, he sort of messes around a little bit, saying, not quite sure how to end this thing, and then says, Thai politics is never static and evokes both despair and hope. Now, you could say that since he wrote that line, quite a lot has happened. So I'm going to end my comments today with a question to Ajahn Prajak. You remember in British politics they have a thing called a swingometer, at elections. They have this thing which goes like this. So on the hope despair swingometer, where are you now? I think this is a very, very, very important question. Okay. Now, I looked at the book in a slightly different way from Duncan, and it seemed to me that the basic question is, why is Thai politics, such a mess, and why is it still getting worse, through this period? And it seemed to me Ajahn Prajak had three sort of planes of argument in here, which are not given the same way, but they add up to me to his total argument. One of those is a political economy argument, one is a pol-sci argument, and the other is ideology. And just briefly summarize those. The political economy one is fundamentally saying, when you have a very divided society, divided in all kinds of ways, divided particularly in the inequality of wealth and income, but also of other kinds of inequality, social inequality. When you have such a society, it has an intrinsic instability, because people do not identify generally with one another. I am not the same as those people. I mean, everyone feels that way. And this makes it very easy for all kinds of different kinds of political tension to erupt into serious political conflicts. So I think this background and this very extreme inequality is a very important part of the analysis. Now, it's not necessarily getting worse. In fact, if anything, the inequality has got slightly better over the last 20 years. That's not the point. It's the awareness of that inequality to the people in the society that counts, not the numbers. And that awareness has changed, to me, very significantly as the society has become more urbanized, as Duncan was talking about. And this is a major change in the last 20 years. And as the media space has become much denser. So people are looking at one another, whether it's on the street in Bangkok, whether it's because you're a motorcycle driver sitting in the exhaust of the Mercedes in front, or whether it's because you can see the spectrum of the society portrayed in the media all the time. So the awareness of inequality has increased enormously. And another point which is important to him, and I think Ajahn Prajak does this very well, it's not so much or even mostly the resentment of the people at the bottom of the people at the top who are better off. It's actually very much about the fear of the people at the top that they could lose their power and their privilege and their advantages if democracy expands and people become more equal. And I think that has been very obviously a very significant part of the political conflict here in the last 20 or 30 years. So that's, roughly the political economy argument. The political science stuff and a lot of the book is in the detail of this, and I'm really going to just pick out 2 points. And that is that what is significant about Thailand's political science, if you like, is that it has these 2 institutions that in world terms have become very strange indeed. I mean, one is monarchy, right? I mean, most societies lost their monarchies about 100 years ago, and relatively few have still got them, and then mostly in a ceremonial form. To still have a monarchy in place with an enormous institutional presence and with ambitions to actually wield the power which is intrinsic in monarchy is very, very unusual indeed, and makes Thailand a very unusual country. And the second institution, he called it the Praetorian Army, and I think that's a very good phrase. But, you know, if you looked around the world 50 years ago, in the aftermath of the wave of the backwash from the enthusiasm about decolonization, military strongmen rose up everywhere to organize the conflicts that came out of this very unusual period. And then they all went away. Nearly everywhere they went away. Burkina Faso, which is the poorest country in the world, is the only one that's competing with Thailand to keep this institution. So again, this is very, very strange to have these 2 institutions. And they obviously have significant in this politics of the period he's writing about. And of course, obviously, with 2006 and 2002 about politics, took us, you have to admit, took us all by surprise. We all thought it was sort of dead and buried, and it seized this opportunity to come back in spades, and is now, of course, sitting there like this huge elephant on the top of the political system. So this is it. So that's the second, the political science, and particularly these 2 institutions. The third one, and this is the difficult one, but I'm going to try and skip around it, is ideology. And I'm not talking in a Marxian sense. I'm just talking about ideas. I think ideas that people hold. And particularly these 2 ideas of monarchy and democracy. And these are very, in their basic nature, very opposed ideas, because ultimately monarchy is saying that all power belongs to one man or one family or one clan, right? So it's the ultimate power inequality. And democracy as a theory is exactly the other way around. It's contending that in theoretical terms, everyone is equal. Power is equally shared out. And even though, of course, in practice that becomes very, very, very qualified, the theory is that every individual has a chance to assert themselves in the decisions of who rules the country. Right? So wherever monarchy and democracy coexist, there has to be a negotiation between these 2 ideas. And this is a negotiation which probably sort of goes on, constantly being changed and renegotiated. I mean, even in the countries of Europe where the power of their monarchies disappeared mostly at the time of the First World War or immediately after that, you still see these little negotiations going on about the end part of their power. Here, very obviously, there's a very big negotiation going on. What 2 things has happened over the period of Pachak's splendid book, which make this quite extraordinary. One, obviously, is the greater assertion of democratic ideas, democratic aspirations, whether that's in what Thaksin came to represent, whether it's in the red shirts, or whether it's in the youth protests of 2020, 2021. These have taken the espousal of democratic ideas and democratic aspirations further than ever before in Thailand. At the same time, extraordinary things have happened with monarchy as well. I mean, the first, with monarchy as a concept kind of floating free at the end of the 9th reign, and the imagination of kingship as a moral force, which was something you could use to oppose the immoral forces of parliamentary politics. This the first very extraordinary advance in the use of the idea of monarchy within the system. Then, and again, as Ajahn Pachak says wonderfully, Suthep and the PDRC was quite remarkable in that it wasn't, as most of these movements, as Duncan was saying now, just let us have a coup and we'll put democracy back together. They said, no, let's get rid of this thing, utterly and completely. The first pure fascists in Thai history, I think, and really quite extraordinary. But what has then happened since then is probably even more extraordinary, and that is what has happened since the succession, where the institution has become very difficult for us to judge what's happening, and very, very difficult for anyone to write about in public. We can see that there was a visible increase in the expansion of the power of the monarchy at that time. Very obviously with the taking back the control of the crown property, exerting the king's control over parts of the army, taking over real estate in the capital, imposing royal power on the Buddhist Sangha. This was visible, and could be talked about. There are other bits which are not really visible, some sort of visible sometimes. Sometimes when you see, a red band around someone's collar or a badge upon here and so on, there are these signals that we can see. When the pardon comes down for Thaksin out of nowhere, these are kind of signals, but it's very difficult to know how to interpret it. And then, of course, there is a large amount of what may be happening, which we can't see at all, and we probably cannot certainly talk about. Now, I don't know how you characterize what has happened, particularly since the succession, but this fact that it has now been asserted by the Constitutional Court that we simply, nobody can even talk about the uses of power by the monarchy. It's as simple as that. It's not available for debate. It's very dangerous for anyone to try and debate this. And I don't know what you call this, but it seems to me to be absolutism of a sort in a very modern form. So the last thing to say, apart from I'd love to see his swingometer, is that I think it's a very good thing that he managed to finish this book when he did. I'm not sure anyone can write it again. Or, put hand on heart and think you are really presenting a picture of what is now going on in Thai politics. Is that possible now? Thank you.
Thank Thank you, Dr. Chris Baker, for your thoughtful remarks, both in terms of theory and reality of Thai politics today. Now it's time for our author of this book to respond to our guest speakers, and with the same question, Ajahn Pachak, why is this book a must read for students of Thai politics? The floor is yours.
Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you Ajahn Duncan and Ajahn Chris for agreeing to join this book launch event. I'm feel very grateful and appreciate, because I consider myself a student of both distinguished scholars here, because since I was an undergrad student at Thammasat, I learned, I studied Thai politics with Likit, Dr. Likit Thiravekin, who passed away several years ago, and several others. But I learned a lot about Thai politics through this study of your books, both Ajahn Duncan and Ajahn Chris. And when I went to do a PhD study at Wisconsin and then ANU, I still have to read these books, you know, written by Professor Duncan and Ajahn Chris, and also, you know, cite a lot of their works in my dissertation. So very, very glad to be on the same panel with these two. I consider my teachers. And I actually, you know, manipulate the the discussion, you know, bribing Dr. Purovit to frame the questions to both of you. Why students have to read this? And I already bribed Professor Duncan through the lunch. You know, I treat him lunch, and is vote buying, you know, Thai style vote buying. So he has to be Kreng Chai. And then I already do a vote buying, you know, 1 year in advance with Ajahn Chris. You remember the FCCT event? I think everyone knows that Ajahn Chris and Ajahn Pasuk published tons of work, but the latest one that become the best-selling books, both in Thai and English, is History of Thailand. The English version published with Cambridge University, the same university press that I published this book, and then the Thai version with Matichon, which is this book are going to be translated and published in Thai version by Matichon also. So I follow Ajahn Chris' path, copy him. And last year, Ajahn Chris and Ajahn Pasuk invited me to join their book launch event. So I said all the nice thing about the book, History of Thailand. So that's the story behind, you know. I didn't plan to say much about the book, especially I don't plan to summarize all the argument in this book, because by doing that, no one gonna buy my book anymore. So it's like a movie, you should not spoil, right? But the ending was spoiled already. But on this point, when I write this book and when I have to write a conclusion, is the most difficult part, and especially the last paragraph, right? How you end this book by not predicting anything and saying anything that gonna prove that you are wrong, right? In the next few months, right? Because Thai politics is like a roller coaster. I remember Ajahn Anek Lao Thamatat told me, I also student of Ajahn Anek when I was undergrad student. He told me that, okay, don't do this. When you do PhD dissertation, don't predict anything. Don't say anything in definite term, because when he wrote dissertation at Columbia, he ended his book by saying that Thailand moved beyond the coup already. The 1991 coup will be the last coup for Thailand, because at that time he want to assert the argument that now the business association very strong and involved in a decision-making process. So Thailand at that time is no longer bureaucratic politics, not dominated by military force, but by this so-called liberal corporatism framework. Just a few months after dissertation, finished, then the coup, right? So I end this book with something very vague, it will be true always, right? It's like a religious statement that both Ajahn Chris and Ajahn Duncan already mentioned about. Thai politics is never static and evokes both despair and hope, right? I insist with the editor, you can edit any sentence in this book except this one, please keep this the way it is, because I want to end this book, supposed to be a textbook, scholarly book, but I want to end with some polemical, statement, kind of, I want to end the book with hope, don't want a student to read, history of Thai politics and then, oh, doom, this country is, we cannot do anything about this, political upheaval, conflict, and then democratic backsliding, which is, it's all this happening, right? All the very, very negative development. But I still want to end with hope, for myself and for the readers. But Ajahn Chris asked me now if I have to. So if I finish this book and we have this event in, let's say, January, February, I think I'm still quite hopeful. But now, in August, September, right? September is more on despair side. But still, I think so now this come to, I will say a few things and then I will finish and open for the Q&A. I think because I want to listen to from the audience. When I write this book, after spending quite a long time, and not only with this book, but in the past 20 years, right, studying Thai politics, you can feel both ways, right? To be quite hopeless or to be hopeful, because Thailand has always two, I would say, two sides of the same coin that you can look at, right? You could make argument that Thailand as a society, we have a strong conditions for democratic change, right? You can use all the theory in the world and you can say that Thailand actually, have all the ingredients to be a functional democracy, right? A strong root of strong civil society, people movement and the ideas are there, right? Since 1932, before 1932, right? There's a seed of this rebellious idea, people, power, and other factors, right? That political scientists gonna say, okay, this society, can be democratic society. But on the other hand, you can look at, many factors that gonna prevent Thailand from being a democratic society. Ajahn Chris published one article about the cultural root, right, of authoritarianism in Thailand. If you look at the some ideas in Thailand, very contradict to building a democratic society, right? And very hierarchical culture, and strong presence of traditional authority, the monarchy, and still intervention from the military. And now Ajahn Phung Thong news book and Paul Chamber news book discuss in length about this, right? The military, which is very strange, as Ajahn Chris mentioned. From Myanmar, Egypt and Burkina Faso, you could not think of any countries that still have a strong military intervene, in political affairs and also other affairs too, not only political, right, but economics and social, even in education these days. Military go to school, go to kindergarten school, high school, and act as a teacher, teaching history in school, But I think what makes Thailand very, very unique is this, not either monarchy or military, but the alliance between these two that quite unique. I could not think of any country that have this combination, right? Military and monarchy institution. Those countries that we mentioned, Egypt, Myanmar, and Burkina Faso, or some African countries that face a coup recently, they have a coup by military, and that's it. When military successfully stage a coup, they become the ruler, right? Yeah. They control the power. But or you have the absolute monarchy in the Middle East or in Brunei or in some other country. But the combination of military monarchy, I think this makes Thailand quite unique, and we need to seriously study and evaluate the impact of the existence of this institution, twin institution, on Thai politics and Thai society. And that's why I start this book. I begin with 1950s. I think Sarit is a very crucial turning point. Sarit Thanara era is a real turning point for Thai politics in my view. I make argument in this book why, so you have to buy this, okay? Why I didn't start with 1932 Kanarasadon revolution, but with Sarit, because that's the beginning of this, alliance between these two institutions, military and monarchy. And just two things that I want to mention. It's very difficult to write this book, as Duncan, Ajahn Duncan mentioned, because and also because of the publisher, they're very demanding. They say you have to do two things. Your job, one is to synthesize all the knowledge that other people have written about Thai politics and make it very easy to understand for people who have no knowledge about Thailand at all. So it has to be accessible to general audience and students in Europe, in UK, US, Australia, that's their target, right? So easy and basic, but you have to be very critical and cutting edge. It should not be standard textbook, that talking about the names of the kings, prime minister, and show the timeline, and you have to have your own take about what you think about Thai politics, what your argument, what your theory or theoretical framework that you use to explain the very difficult situation to understand. So that's why I struggle with it for quite some time. That's why that the book is quite short, right? I have to finish within everything within 70 pages. So finally, I find that historical approach is quite useful to organize. And thank you for all the the comments and questions, and I hope I can do better, and if I have time to revise next time, have more space about what happened outside Bangkok, always very important, right? And the civil society, actually, the people movement outside Bangkok, always fascinating. And Ajahn Chris actually summarize the argument of the book better than the author, and the way. So I into three, right? The political economy, political science, and political ideological argument. But I want to look at both the elite and the way elite, control Thai society and sustain their power. I think the Thai elite times, and they have various strategies to sustain their power. And I talk about this strategy of in this book. One thing in particular that I want to mention, and I think it's really significant today, is a politics of co-optation. So this day, Kun Thaksin and Pheu Thai might think that they successfully co-opt Democrat and other parties to join their government, right? But if you look at Thailand as two games, right, not only at the political party and parliamentary politics, if you look at the in Thailand, it's not only about, who become a prime minister, who, win the election. But if you look at the military and the monarchy and the is the other way around, right? That Kun Thaksin and Pheu Thai being co-opted by the elite to be part of this status quo and, protect this, oligarchical structure, that exists in Thailand. So that's one thing. But I want to also look at the way that people, all against this status quo, against the autocratization, against democratic backsliding through times and through various ways, right? Street politics, involved in the election, even though you can lose, or you have to risk your life, right? And this pushback by the people, mobilization by the people and the courage of the people. That's why I make the assertion that we can still be hopeful. Thai politics, and it's always contested. And at the end, so to give another quote, Thailand is highly contested polity, right? And that's it. And I still, want to end my talk with hope. Is yes, very very grateful to have both of you and also the audience, coming today. So that's what all I want to say for now. Okay, and I think we should have a discussion. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Prajak, for your contribution. contribution to this book. I just read it again this morning, and I believe that your book, meets the publisher demand. It's very simple, very comprehensive. What you need to know about politics is like Thai politics 101. And I believe that this book is a good starting point to read other major works in Thai politics. Okay, I think we have plenty of time for this discussion. If you have any question, comment, please raise your hand and turn on the microphone, please. Yes, please.
Thank you for your wonderful panel discussion. Just to pick up on, before I go to my question, your bit about the meta-politics. A former colleague of mine, I used to be at the Australian Embassy, Susanna Patton, wrote something in Lowy Institute the other day about the change of Prime Minister here. And a nice way she put that was a headed list of the 10 most important people in Thailand would not include the Prime Minister. Which I think is another way of capturing what you were saying there. To make a prediction. And that is that the other day we had at the Foreign Correspondents Club a discussion on Thai politics, and Professor Titinan talked about the current situation and made a parallel between the absence of public protest following recent events, and he compared it with sort of sitting in Bangkok's traffic. It doesn't move, there's people breaking the law, weaving in and out, but no one honks their horn, no one reacts in a sort of an animated way, I suppose. But I've been thinking a bit more about what he had to say. You can see the logic of it. But I think those people sitting in Bangkok's traffic would react very strongly if the authorities said, we're going to take away the car of half of you. Half of you no longer can drive a car. And to take that forward, my question is about the next election. If, as the date of the next election draws nearer, and if it looks likely that the successor party to move forward will go close to or perhaps get a majority, will efforts be made to prevent that election happening, to somehow thwart that election? And if so, how do you think the Thai public, the Thai electorate will respond?
Would you like to answer now or just collect other question? If not,
so the whole panel can. This is a collective task, right?
Yes, you're delegated to speak on our behalf. You please start, Joe. It's your book. Yes.
So you have two basic, tools, right? No, you are going to lose the election. Basically, if there's a question, what you are going to do, right, as an elite. In the past, they always resort to the coup, military coup, right? Because that the game that they are very skillful, and if you look at the in the past, right? Coup is not difficult thing for the military to do. To such a coup is not difficult, but how to maintain power and gain legitimacy after that is more challenging. But this day is not only you don't need to resort to the military coup in order to maintain power or change the balance of power, right? As we witness the judiciary, the role of the judiciary, right? You can use the constitutional court to dissolve the political party, right, before the election. You can use the anti-corruption commission, to disqualify, the MPs and the candidates, right? Election commission, right? You have various tools to create an uneven playing field that you can win power through election by not having to resort to the military coup. So I think to answer your questions, for the next election, it's still 3 years ago, right? It's too soon again to predict anything, right? So because by December, 44 MPs of now the Move Forward Party or Prachachon Party, the new name, can be disqualified, right? And that gonna weaken the Prachachon Party very much, right? So along the way, up until the next election, they might already weaken the Prachachon Party to the point that they're confident to hold the election. But if they think by holding election and they're gonna lose, they still have other tools, to to distort the view of the majority, as we witnessed last year, right? That you can change and manipulate the election result and form a government that's safe for the elite, right? Because the only way that, as I see now, for Prachachon Party to gain power is to win landslide and form a one-party government, right? If they could not win a landslide, it means you need other parties to join coalition. And I think other party will be coerced by the elite, right? Not to join coalition led by the Prachachon's Party. Yeah. I don't know, what do you think?
Okay, yeah, it's a lot of hypotheticals and counterfactuals here, so it's a little bit hard to project ourselves into that situation. I mean, I am reminded of a conversation I had the day before the election last year, where I was talking to someone who should be nameless about the election, and was saying, well, what happens if this party gets this number of seats? And then the person said to me, Ajahn, you still don't get it. The election result is not the point. The outcome's already determined. It doesn't matter how many seats party X gets, right? Let's hope that doesn't continue to be the case, but we always have to remember that and usually moves against elections are not preemptive. Usually the election takes place and then the outcome is reshaped accordingly. So yeah, the possibilities for doing that are actually there. Would it be possible the outcome wouldn't be reshaped? I guess that's sort of the question behind your question. Is there some point when the network, whatever, could be reconciled to the possibility of that kind of government? I guess we don't see it yet, but then again, 3 years is a long time, and maybe the dynamics can change. The main things that we learn from reading Ajahn Prajak's book and thinking back to what's happened since the late 1950s is we don't really know what's going to happen because the dynamics can shift in so many different ways. But what we do know is that, election results and election outcomes are two different things.
This reflects on Ajahn Prajak also talking about how he ends the book. I mean, I often get asked by journalists to predict in this way, and after a bit I found a great way to begin this, which is to say, okay, I will predict for you, but first I will tell you that I'm always wrong.
Yeah, right.
So, what Duncan is saying. You know, the tendency looking forward is straight line, right? And when you look back in Thai politics, it's, you know, like this. You know, so a lot can change in 3 years. The personnel is going to change. You know, the people in the room, if you like, are going to change in ways. Are we sure the judiciary is not internally in turmoil? I mean, I've had some people talking to me, you know, who are, you know, we saw that the 134 with Ajahn Kem Tong amongst them coming out and objecting. Yeah, it was a very, very powerful statement, and I think very, very important. And just as, you know, as to do, the day I noticed that the day after the second Constitutional Court ruling, the schoolgirls were wearing the white. We hadn't seen for a couple of years. There's a lot there under the surface, and I think, which is more or less what Duncan is saying, is that it's quite likely going to get much more difficult to manage the outcome of the election. I think it's going to be very, very difficult. I think there was, you know, last time, and I like very much the way in the book you just referred to it, there was clipping of the results, which was very interesting. But to have a major manipulation of the result. I mean, maybe General Pruitt is sending his people off to Venezuela right now to study how to do this, but I think it's going to be quite difficult. Anyway.
Thank you. Any other question? Yes, please.
Thank you for the good presentation and very useful book. I had a question regarding what you say about Sarit. I was quite agree with you about the fact that Sarit is very important to understand what is happening in Thailand and about the power structure. Still, the Kanarasadon is still a huge memory for Thai people, especially now we see with the People's Party. And I was wondering if to focus too much about military, about Sarit and about power structure can lead to more desperation than hope for the reader and to understand Thailand for the future students.
Thank you very much, Ajahn Prajak, for your presentation. I wanted to ask you about how you see international forces playing a role in shaping political outcomes. In the initial periods, like during the Cold War, it seems that things that are taking place at the global level have a very influential role to play in shaping political trajectory in Thailand. Play at the global level are shaping outcomes. Is Thai politics becoming more or less self-contained over time in the sense that international factors don't matter anymore, or is it?
Just taking my voice, that's fine. Just asking if better like toward the end of the joint hand with the royalist elite and now they try to dominate political landscape and tolerate no dissent at all. When you look at the Senate forward, I mean, they are turning right in another way. I mean, the way they start criticizing elected politicians, the way they take moral high grounds, criticizing, and the way they mock or even project their heads, brilliant, where like you have like both right wing in both camps, like crashing.
Thank you. For this round, I will sub for the panelists. Yep.
Mainly for you.
But you can help. You can help.
You
Right?
start.
Oh, yeah, good point and great questions. Now it feels like Kem Tong first. I think we can see right on the horizon that the new round of conflict is brewing already for the Thai society, and you have competing networks and as Duncan mentioned that to manipulate day by day, and the way that the elite use the constitutional court and this judiciary intervention is also costly, right? And in the past, why we have democratic struggle, from time to time we have democratic uprising. Don't forget that Thailand is a country that also full of protests, uprising, by the students, by, in the night. And just during lunch, I asked Duncan that in the past 5 years, if I ask you that what is the most surprising event that has protests, right? No one expect that. No one expect that, right? Even a long-time observer of, no one see it coming. Even I teach and I have to deal with students all the time. I know that they're not expect to see a protest in that scale, and also the ideas that they advocate in the public. So 20 protests, right? Right now, looking in just the short term, I can see the new conflicts. Yeah, but I'm gonna repeat the color-coded conflict. But what the new pattern of conflict gonna transpire? Who gonna be the actors involved, and what the issues that gonna be used, to mobilize people? I cannot answer that yet right now. Yeah.
Right. You mentioned the rightward turn of the kind of People's Party, Gao so on movement. I guess I should say something about that, since I did some work about the future. Good example of a party that would help you to understand Gao or whatever we're now calling it. That phenomenon will be like the German Green Party, which started being a more marginal party and then moves into the mainstream. To me, that's not exactly the analogy, because Thanaton for me has always represented something very intriguing. He's the billionaire with no money. I literally had to buy. The rejection of consumerism, of people who love consumerism, which is one of the great paradoxes of Bangkok society. So there's a sense in which the politics of virtue, and I'm doing a lot of interviews at the moment, I talk to super conservative people who say, well, of course we hate everything that Pak Prachashon. Since they're invoking this anti-corruption, anti-money politics agenda that was partly behind the reformist era of the 1990s, and so they are more virtuous than any other party. And this virtuous element is one of the very complicated mix of elements that has been in the whole Future Forward project from the beginning. But they're holier than thou, they're setting themselves up to look down on other people, and you get this kind of backlash against the virtuousness. So a lot of very complicated things are happening with this party, which, like Palang Tam, I think is split into different wings. With each time the leadership changes, the thing moves on, evolves in a new direction. So something strange is happening. I don't know if it's exactly a rightward turn, but I think that theme in Thai politics, that we want to get rid of corruption, we want to be clean, we want to be pure, is that theme is coming to the surface in a way that could be good, but it's progressive, and it's introducing radical change, and it's overturning the establishment. So I don't know what I'm really saying here, but I'm just the massive contradictions that is within these three parties and the associated movement and the protest and everything that goes with it. One of the elements is this element which is on one level a bit odd, but another level.
And yes, and I So for both points, I thank you for Ajahn Napon's questions. I think yes, the international factors are very important. And since the beginning, I think Thailand, if you look historically, right, we never be a closed country. So the colonization period, right, shaped very much the way that we build a modern state, right, by the monarchy during Rama V, and then the Second World War shaped the conflict within the People's Party, and the Cold War period very, very much, influencing. Actually, the military monarchy alliance is a product of the Cold War politics. And I think Ajahn Nathapon books clearly elucidate this in details, in a fascinating way. You see all the actors and the way they, local actors in Thailand interact with, the US, various organizations. But in the later period, the fact that I didn't mention or discuss or incorporate these external factors to discuss Thai politics doesn't mean it's not important. Just I run off my word, and pages, because I think it's quite complicated, but it's important to discuss about this. But it needs, another chapter, okay, to talk about this. I think I mentioned briefly about the financial crisis, and that's the globalization, force that shaped Thailand. Actually, the rise of Thaksin, right, is deal with this and response to this, and also the coup, both coup and especially the latest coup by Prayut, right? I think now when you do a coup, you have to navigate the international politics and the rivalry between the US and the China. Okay, but taking all this into account, it's gonna need a lot more space, right, to discuss. But I think a very important point. Yeah, I think Thailand always shaped by the external factors, international environment, very important. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Any other question? Yes, please.
Thank you, all three ajahns on the panels. I have questions about the mass politics or street politics. In this last almost 20 years, Thai society is very divided and the problem is very difficult to solve. I think partly because we saw the involvement of the people, the mass politics, the rise of the yellow and the red shirts. But this, the rise of the red shirt and yellow shirt, are the power, the basic power of the political party that involve also the royalist elite. They give hope to both sides. For example, such as the red shirt give hope to the Thai party, and they think that by using street politics, it will give advantage to the Thai party. The yellow shirt as well. They hope that the sheer number of the people will be able to for them to topple the government that they didn't want. But after a series of protests, series of street politics, violence and chaos, people, especially the middle class, are very scared of this kind of street politics. They don't want it anymore. And even if I remember it, I think at one time, the leaders of the Future Forward Party always said that they don't want to risk the life of the people on street politics. And also, when we see the rise of the youth movement in 2020, a lot of them are being arrested, charged, being imprisoned. Many have to leave the countries, and no one accountable for them. So it means that they risk their life. So it seems that even now we see that the power of the orange color voters, that they are, I mean, it seems that their number is increasing, and they empower the move forward of the People Party right now. But without the show of the people power, say on street politics, I don't see how we going to break the deadlock set up by the elite through infrastructure of power right now. So it's like that we the people are being trapped within this dilemma. We don't want to say street politics, but without street politics, we can't break up this deadlock. Okay, what do you think?
I think that's very insightful and very important. I'd like just to add one more angle to that. One of the big changes, seems to me, worldwide has been the advancements in the technology of repression. And you have written about some of this, but the technology of surveillance, whether it's Pegasus or whatever, or those little clicks we all get on our phones every now and then. But also simply down to Thailand's own contribution to this technology, which was building walls using shipping containers flown in by helicopter overnight. And this should be recognized. I don't think it's been done anywhere else in the world. But I mean, that's a bit of a joke. But the serious point is that this technology of surveillance and repression, whether it's just the water cannons and all of that, we must remember that until very recently, the only thing that the soldiers and the police who went on the street, right up to the yellow shirts, they were still, live ammunition, and that's, basically all of they had. But now they have, water cannons and all other stuff, which is much more efficient for suppressing street politics because it's less inflammatory. If you shoot people, it's very inflammatory. But if you spray them with water, it's not. So there is this, that's part of this advantage of repression. And I think the other part has been how cleverly the court system has been used to suppress those ideas and enthusiasms and aspirations that came up in 2020, 2021 by picking off the major leaders, and putting them away for a long, long time. I mean, that has required the cooperation, a very broad spectrum of the judiciary to continue to hand down these kinds of sentences. And it's not really very surprising after this has happened that the enthusiasm for street politics has melted away. But the other thing I'd like to say in response to that very good question is, think back to these other sort of black times and what then happened. And I'm thinking of particularly after 1976, right? When you went into what was, the most right-wing government you had seen, and you were burning books. You know, I mean, it's the ultimate, you know, repressive period. What then happened? And of course, what happened was that the elite splintered, right? And certain parts of it said, we cannot afford this kind of repression, and the sort of general Brem compromise emerged out of that. So I can imagine that the next step forward is something more like that than a revolution on the streets. As I say, I'm always wrong.
Say something. I think, yeah, very difficult, very important questions of Ajahn Phung Thong. I think it's a real dilemma, and dilemma is there, and people who want to push for democratic change, I think, confront with this dilemma, both the activists and also the politicians, right? Because we had repeated history of protests being suppressed violently, and people die, right? And sometimes it lead to no change, right? Yeah, difficult to answer. But if you look in this book, I talk about the tools that the elite use, the repression, institutional manipulation, and the co-optation. Sometimes we might need to fight with these tools by not resorting to the protest, but have to find other ways. I know it's difficult, but I think the success of the Move Forward Party, since the Future Forward Party, and I think is a great contribution of people like Thanathorn and his peers in founding this party, is at least it shows that it can change within the system through, you know, engaging in the party politics, even though it's not, you know, capture the state power and form the government. But in the past 5 years since the founding of the Future Forward Party, I think they changed Thai society a lot, especially on ideological front, on the term of ideas, you know, the contested ideas. And I think in this front, the Thai elite is insecure right now, right? Because the Thai state, the Thai establishment, the military monarchy alliance, they depend so much on the thought control. And that's why they still invest a lot on technology and all this, you know, writing the new curriculum, you know, and keep rewriting, you know, the history, and why they sue Ajahn Nathapon, you know, just by writing, you know, a history about during the Cold War period, right? I think look at the elite, they're also insecure and they're also vulnerable. I don't think they are very confident and in complete control in doing this kind of things. Too much repression can evoke, you know, resistance, right? But in what form, in what way, I don't know yet. We don't know yet. Yeah, but yeah, I think that this dilemma need to be taken into account. Yeah.
I have checked. There is no question online, so I think we still have 1 or 2 questions for the last round. If you have any question, please show your hand and turn on the microphone. Yes, please. Our student.
Okay. As Ajahn Pathak said earlier, if People Party really have a chance to win, they have to win like landslide, right? And if it really happened, if we get to elect and People Party could win landslide, is there any chance that they would be able to govern?
Thank you so much, Ajahn Tan. Yes, please.
Thank you for this panel. I'm very happy to be here with a lot of famous scholars talking about Thai politics. I have just small question, but I think maybe it's I don't know if you can answer my question. I think my question is related to Ajahn Phuong Thong in the sense that Ajahn Phuong Thong focusing on the street politics. And since you mentioned about despair and hope is your last word. So I'm wondering if we as a people has any political tools or any instrument to break the deadlock that Ajahn Phuong Thong talk about. Thank you.
Yes, please. I could say last question. Okay.
So, thank you, Ajahn McCargo, to bring up about the virtual thing element. And my question is about these religious elements and ideas that it has playing in this power dynamics. That does it still work for the establishment to use this kind of idea to support their ideology? And in essence, is Thai society doesn't need to be secularized in order to progress in democracy? Thank you.
No, very good. 3 questions regarding the election, the deadlock, and the, I would say, thought control. How would it work? Okay, and it's time for our panelists to, answer.
Okay, you're looking at me. Okay. Yeah, I guess the first question was a variant on James's question, the hypotheticals, right? So, because if we think about what we've been saying up to now, we've got this choice between despair and hope, right? So the desperate answer is, oh no, one way or another, whatever, if any progressively oriented party wins, then sooner or later everything will be retrospectively fixed in some way and they won't be allowed to govern, right? And the hope is, and Chris was hinting at this when he talked about what happened after 76, I think, that the reason why we have this government is because some kind of deal has been done behind the scenes. Whatever anybody says and would like to deny, we know a deal's been done behind the scenes. Is this maybe not a deal, but can some accommodation be reached between elements of the conservative establishment and these progressive forces? Because at a certain point, when Pheu Thai became so strong that it was impossible for the establishment, if the progressive forces become so strong, is there a moment when the establishment, or whatever you want to call it, has to come to some kind of accommodation with those forces because the alternative is not really workable? That would be the optimistic scenario. How it would play out, we don't really know. But I guess that is the ultimate question, and I think that's why there's all this talk about we need a landslide, whether that's something that could really happen or not. But it's an aspiration that at a certain point, the two sides would have to come, and the two sides would be the real two sides, not Pheu Thai, who turned out to be, playing both sides. The real two sides would have to reach an understanding of some kind between them. Could that happen? And the hope is actually probably has to be something along those lines, right? If we assume that neither side is going away, then can they come to some understanding, which is not a shoddy, compromised, messy, fudged deal, but something a little bit more reasonable or decent than that. And then maybe I should just respond a bit to the last question. I think what's so interesting is, and this is what I was hinting at, and Kem Tong set me off on this point, because, well, I know all about his interests in thesis a few years ago. So what I was trying to say is, I think before, so I talked about politics of virtue in some of my previous writings, fighting for virtue, right? So virtue is something that has been monopolized by the conservative side. But I think now the progressive side could actually claim to be if you look at them, they're actually more virtuous than the conservative side. So what do the conservatives do when actually they're no longer virtuous, but the virtuous people are the people who are against them? I think that's the interesting cognitive dissonance that we have now. It's very obvious that the virtuous people are not the ones who used to be virtuous, but the ones who are against those people. And how do we reprogram our brains to talk about virtue when the people who are against vote buying, the people who are against corruption, turn out to be also the people who are kind of against the existing conservative power structures. So I think a very interesting reframing is going on. How conscious this is on all levels, I don't know. But something absolutely fascinating is happening with the politics of virtue, because it's being redefined as we speak. And that to me creates actually a moment of hope too, because we thought that virtue could be monopolized by one side. And what happens when not only does that side lose its monopoly, but it actually ceases to be credible when it talks about virtue? Amazing, yes. So that could be a source of hope as well.
I endorse absolutely what Duncan said just then, but both those of his main points. And I think one of the most impressive things about Future for Gaogai, whatever we have to have a sort of orange, yes, the orange movement. That's probably the best way. Is the way that they have held their heads up high while they have been thumped down particularly by the Constitutional Court. I think particularly the statement Kun Chaitawat came out and talked the day after the Constitutional Court, where he more or less said, you can stop us talking about this issue, but the issue isn't going to go away, which I think was very brilliantly said. And so, yes, I think that's the way it's going.
How to break the deadlock, right, and the role of other people. I will answer this by referring to the idea that I gained from one politician. You would be surprised that who is this guy? I would not tell you the name. He's still powerful and can make me in trouble. Very, very powerful. But I think I interviewed him. This guy very interesting. He used to work with Thaksin and then he break away. And now since then he take up a new role, And he said that, but he himself very critical to the establishment actually, and he knows what's going on in this country. He said, if we have political dinosaur, and the political dinosaur is so resourceful and powerful, you cannot kill dinosaur by take up arms and fight with a dinosaur directly. The way that you can do is you create the conditions that finally a dinosaur gonna die. Dinosaur cannot live with that environment. I don't know if he's just opportunistic or he's a real subversive force, by saying that. But the same, I think, in Thailand, I think by undermining the legitimacy of the elite, you already, contributing to change, and everyone can be part of this cultural political struggle through everyday life, right? It's a contestation of idea. And as Ajahn Chris mentioned that in Thailand, we're not talking about ideology in the Marxist sense, but contestation of ideas is always at the heart of political change in Thailand if you look back in the history, right? And that is the when you plant new ideas and then you can convince people, and then you can create the movement, especially when people are not giving up, right? As Jan Chris mentioned, and Duncan also talk about this, the idea of virtue itself, right? You can, hijack it from the conservative and make it more, right? Has been highly contested, and always both sides trying to, claim who represent, a democracy in true democracy in Thailand, right? Okay, that again I talk about the seed of hope, and then I think it's in a very definite term, because it's changing so fast. By the next 2 months again, we might, the questions might have been changed, right? Mm-hmm.
Yes, Ajahn Pongthong, please.
Just want to about the virtue. I think politics without virtue is chaos. Even Western politics also involve virtue and prejudice. But I think what we need to do is to define what virtue means for each side.
Right.
In Thai politics, okay, every party is claiming that they are คนดี ความดี or abide to the principle, democratic principle หลักการ But for the Thai royalists, I mean, for example, you talking about the future forward party, saying, blaming the other side of vote buying, corruption, that kind of thing, this kind of virtue. So they are equivalent to the other side. For the royalist establishment, for them, virtue mean that if you are part of them, even though you violate the rule of law, if there are evidence that you are corrupt, for example, when many years ago, when we found out that one of the privy councillors occupy a forest land, so he got away easily. Military business doesn't have to be investigated. There's no need to ask for transparency because the military are on the คนดี side, on the good people side. So this is a definition of the virtue for the Thai establishment. So it doesn't mean that if you're talking about you're attacking the other side that they're vote buying and you have evidence on it, and it means that you are the same quality of the other side. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not trying to suggest a sort of equivalence between the two sides, but I am suggesting that since this virtue thing has been rolled out endlessly as a form of legitimacy and justification, it's getting more and more difficult to tell this story in this way, and it's other side to repackage, represent, and redefine. Of course, it's an ongoing process, and yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. Obviously, if you absolutely believe in a certain kind of conservative understanding about virtue, then nothing you one way or another. But there's a lot of people out there for whom they can be swayed. There's a lot of people in a middle ground, and we've seen a huge shift in public sentiments in terms of voting over the past couple of elections. So that's where the possibility. It's a dangerous road to go down, but it is just interesting now that virtue and these political positions are becoming decoupled. Yeah.
If you want to, okay. If we don't have any other question, I think we have a very wonderful and engaging discussion this afternoon. And on behalf of Direct Chayanam Research Center at the Faculty of Political Science, Thammasat University, I would like to thank you, our distinguished speakers, Professor Duncan McCargo, Dr. Chris Baker, and Dr. Prajak Kongkirati, the author of this book, and I also like to thank you all the participants here. I really appreciate your participation here, and we hope that we will have other opportunity in the future to welcome you in this kind of seminar. Although the climate of Thai politics here is so desperate today, but I think we are today. I think one thing that we have got is we need to be hopeful that one day it will be better. Okay, I take a chance to conclude this seminar and see you again next time. Thank you.